let's be adults in the room now and say, this has had a real effect on our children and how we're going to actually fix it.
Yeah, when I first started the primary school, I was working in a what was a year 3, and they're now actually now they're year 5 now, aren't they? Because we're back in September. So I was working with them last year, and they were year 4, and they would have been in reception, or I think so. Occasionally you just get like a year group or a class that are just sort of inordinately, disproportionately out there and difficult. But this group of kids were like really, really hard, really, really difficult. And apparently it's cropping up sort of around the place, around sort of where I'm from. So I can imagine, I mean, I don't know enough about sort of childhood development, but I do know that there was a psychologist that basically discovered something where when you look, because obviously apparently toddlers 2 to 3 year olds are the most violent people of an age range. So they kick, scream, bite more than any age range in human age. And I'm not sure what the percentage, but it's a small percent, usually boys, who are hyper violent, and so they'll kick, scream, they'll kick, bite more, disproportionately more than other people and other kids. And if you don't socialize those children by age 4, they will never catch up with their peer groups, and they will basically, because one thing, as you guys, I'm sure you're aware of, at least that I found, that kids don't, I think you said something earlier, but kids don't like to associate with children that they think are lower than them. There's this urge in children to sort of aim up and to grow and to want to be more than they are, which is, why they can fall prey to, as we were talking about earlier, certain characters. But these kids that aren't successfully socialized by age 4 will basically just become socially isolated, and they're the men that end up in prison, because they're the ones that end up with antisocial personality disorder, because but then if you can socialize them and you can get them to a point where they can control that, it's actually exceptionally beneficial for them, because they possess the qualities that can, I'm a very agreeable person by temperament, and I'm sure that you guys are, because you wouldn't be in a primary school if you weren't. And there's some great benefits to that, but there's also some drawbacks to that.
Oh yeah, do you remember that time that we absolutely ruined that generation because we just allowed them to have TikTok all the time? Let's not do that anymore. But that generation existed, so I feel sorry for them. We got to navigate.
Apparently, there's always this dilemma of like social media and suicidality among teenagers, and no one could quite prove, is it just that people that use teenagers are more likely to feel teenagers that use social media are more likely to use to feel depressed, or is it actually that the social media is contributing to the depression? And apparently there was a new study that they've released, and it's basically shown, not proven because you can't prove things as such, but it's shown that actually they're causally connected. So I think in the next few years they're really, really, I think that's the next logical step. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but just going back to the sort of, I remember when my first phone was just like a little BlackBerry knockoff, little Vodafone BlackBerry knockoff. It had like those buttons, and I had an iPod, and I was so desperate to get a phone. I used to download apps that would like turn your iPod into a phone. I don't know what I was, in hindsight, I don't know what I was doing, but nowadays the technology that children have at their disposal, I mean, because it's one thing, it just shifts your perspective so much. So I remember because life is all about, when you sort of, drugs, why they are so addictive is because they elevate you in a state, but then they also drop you back down. So, and that sort of maligns your, what would you say, your mood, I guess, in this case. But if you look at it from a technology perspective, what is having access to that intense peak going to do to that drop off? as they get older and grow up? How are they going to sort of rectify that chasm that will be created by those intense levels of dopamine that they have access to, and then the pain that comes with being a teenager, because it is painful, it is hard, especially as you were talking about, especially for girls. I mean, puberty for boys is kind of like you just become more of what you are. You just get bigger, you get stronger, you get more muscle. I mean, I had awful spots when I was growing up, so for me it wasn't so great. But I mean,
no, same boat.
Yeah, exactly. But for girls, they completely change, and so yeah, I mean, mental health for children is an entire podcast. You could literally do a separate podcast on that, you two. But
well, I think we might have to.
Yes, no, I mean, you should like reach out to some like specialists, or I don't really like that word, specialist, but people that sort of do that.
I know what you mean.
They would love to. They would love to talk to you. I can't believe we're already 50 minutes in and we haven't got long left. But I've loved talking with you. I can tell that you guys are good teachers, actually, because even though we're not in the same room, I can get a sense of people after doing this enough now of who they are just by sort of having to speak with them. And I can tell that you guys are really good people. And
I appreciate that.
And I really, because the attack on men as a entity is so awful nowadays, and when I come across men that I think are doing a good job, I just have this urge. I'm like, yes, you're. This is it. This is what we need. This is what children need. This is what society needs. They need men that are trying to help and trying to do a good thing, and they need to be appreciated. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, from a collective, from just sort of thank you to what you guys are doing. I know that sounds so soppy, but I can't really articulate it. But I have this sort of like,
I know exactly what you mean,
because so yeah, that was a bit of a random, but
it's just, no, I know what you mean. Because I think what you notice in today's society is, and we always say this about everything, the loudest people are usually the worst people. And a reflection of that is that, rightfully so, things have been called out more in recent times than previously. There are certain things, absolutely, as men, that certain men do that are absolutely wrong and should be called out. And for too long, it was kind of like, yeah, it's fine, it's a bit about it, it's cool, it's just, old Jim. We don't go around old Jim after 9 when he's had a couple of drinks, do we? And it's like, no, that's the wrong attitude to have, because we need to call out things that are wrong and say these are wrong, absolutely. And equally, just even as people, I see myself as a man. Obviously, Hayden, I identify that way as if to say I'm not scared of saying, yeah, I'm a bloke. Of course I am. But I think what fundamentally defines me and Hayden, I'd say more than anything, is I just care about actually putting a good message out there and helping people. So I really appreciate what you've been saying.
No, I agree, and I'm completely with you. I'm not a fan at all of prioritizing people's, like, what would you say, arbitrary demographics. It's all about about who you are. But we are in a world and a landscape where people do that. So I do think if people are going to talk like that, then I'll be like, okay, well then I'll have to rebuttal in that language, because that's the only way you can understand it. Even though the point I'm trying to make is that
I get what you mean, yeah,
isn't like gender specific, but yeah. So just know what you're doing a really, that sounds so patronising, but I think you get the sense.
No. Listen, we're teachers. Yeah. We're the most patronising people in the world. A child can literally tuck their chair in and be like, "Oh, did you see this? He tucked his chair in. Look at this guy. Look, let's stop. We're gonna clap him. Right? So don't worry about patronising. We do that for a living."
You're right. You've got to make an example out of people, haven't you? And go, you're doing the right thing. Everyone congratulates you, and then everyone else is like, okay. So
I want a piece of that.
Yeah, exactly. I want a piece of that. I want that dopamine hit. Unfortunately, good dopamine though, because there's good and bad reward.
Exactly. Yeah.
So where are we getting to now? Well, let's talk a little about parenting. We can talk about you guys being parents, actually, and what have you learned what not to do through being a teacher and interacting with parents? Firstly, Hayden, you can answer that. Which of your children is oldest? Who's got the older child?
So Dylan's boy is 6 weeks older than my little
Oh, that's
girl.
fine then. It doesn't matter. That's negligible.
But he's got one on me now.
Yeah.
I'm 1 year ahead of him in life, but he's got.
It's weird. He just keeps copying me. I had a baby as a baby. He feeds the baby just because I fed the baby.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
Her baby, her baby, his baby gets toys just because my baby got. Honestly,
Yeah.
constantly.
Sorry, I just beat
What are
you.
you doing,
Yeah,
Hayden?
Jesus.
Be original.
Yeah, yeah. I know.
I'm sorry, Dylan. Have you fed him today? Yes, you have. Okay, I can't.
I'll do it as well then.
Well, I can't do that now. Oh, God, I can't copy him.
Hayden, why haven't you fed the baby
anyway.
in 6 weeks? Well, because Dylan told me to stop copying, but
Yeah. I'm not allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fastest pregnancy you've ever seen.
Yeah. Why she got no toys left? Well, Dylan, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Anyway, there was a question.
There was
Sorry,
a
there was a
question
question.
about-
What do you know not to do?
Yeah, what we learned. That's a really good question. I feel like I've never actually been asked that hilariously, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of the good ones. I learned not to do.
or just what is it like
think-
being a parent? I mean, either way is fine.
Yeah.
I would say something from the outside whilst you think.
Yeah.
I've seen in you, and especially what you've been saying today, you've definitely having had a girl. I know for a fact that you've definitely been a bit more like, oh, one day this will be my girl one day, and I can see you like really thinking about that and the environment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is strange. Yeah, I think that's a good point actually, because raising a boy and a girl in today's society, it is different.
Yeah,
and just seeing the world she's going to grow up into, I'm very aware of how boys and girls are treated differently, and I think you start noticing it. I start noticing it at school by probably about year 4. I feel like when I've taught in year 4, year 5, year 6, by year 6 definitely the kids are like acutely aware of the cultural differences that we put on ourselves as the differences between boys and girls, and hilariously, ironically, amplified by the whole movement of the last 20 years to boys and girls. Let's equalize it. They're not different at all, which I feel like has hilariously gone the other way, but that's a whole different discussion. But boys and girls, I think they're really aware by the age of 10 that they're totally different. And I think about it a lot now because I look at River, my little girl, and I think, God, if she has particular interests in things that are typically masculine, maybe she likes football, will she feel that cultural pressure still by 10 years old to stop doing it because it's not what girls do? Because that's how they feel, And I think that is getting better over time. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as it used to be.
Well, even football's the perfect example for that.
Yeah, but I still see it. But and I think it is much better now. With girls' football teams, I'm way better at school. But I have still every single year, I've still taught at least one girl who I absolutely know wholeheartedly is only stopping the thing they really enjoy doing because they've been teased by the boys about it. Someone has made them feel like, nah,
it's a boy
you're
thing.
a girl though, and this is a boy thing, even though we all pretend it's not. We've been taught not to. We all still think it, so we're going to make you feel it. And I think I really, really hope that doesn't happen. So I'm super aware of that, like more than ever now that I've got a little girl.
Good job you answered the question, by the way, about what you've learned.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I will come back to that question because I have got an answer.
No, I just see it from your point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
What if you got an answer?
No, I don't know. It's really interesting because where we've had our children for a year now, so even thinking about schools, we kind of know what school they'll go to because of the local area. We've got a few choices, maybe 2 or 3. But having had my child, I think having been a teacher affects definitely how you parent. We've talked about this before, and I think without a doubt the importance of the early years. Like if someone comes around our house, they'll say, my goodness, we know you two are teachers. My partner's a teacher as well. So we know you two are teachers because there's 57 books in a pile in the front room. It's on the floor. And I think having dealt with parents before, I know how I'm going to treat my teachers when my child goes to school. Because I think what goes a long way for teachers is just a bit of understanding and a bit of the rub of the green to say, okay, my child's come home really upset. My child's come home saying that the teacher did this. It was completely unfair. I got told off for something I didn't do. All I think we want as teachers is we know we can make mistakes sometimes. I've told children off before when absolutely they actually didn't do what I'm telling them off for. And we need to say sorry and move on from there and explain how everyone makes mistakes, etc., etc. But I think what I really appreciate from parents is when they just don't automatically believe their 7-year-old child, and instead they want to talk to the 31-year-old professional who's been teaching for 10 years, just to see maybe the other side of the story is quite important, because we've had a few brazen parents, and I'll be honest, it's not as many as you might feel in the media, like what we see sometimes. But you had a few brazen parents who will come out and say, apparently you told my child off for swearing. My child doesn't swear. I'm just like, oh, well, I did see it with my own eyes. So how do I go about this conversation right now? So yeah, just a bit of understanding, I think, as a parent.
You kind of stole my point, because I was literally going to make that point. My thing not to do is believe my child, because kids lie profusely, and any parent who says their kids don't lie, I have no idea. I've never met a child who has gone more than a day without lying on it. We all lie. You lie when you grow up. You meet a 7.
Well, you're learning boundaries, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's awesome. And you naturally just lie. You don't want to be in trouble, and then you start to learn when you think when you're going to get away with it, and when not. And everyone lies, man. And so I'm absolutely not going to automatically believe my kids.
Yeah, automatically is the key word.
Yeah,
so sometimes absolutely.
Yeah, I'll look into it, but most of the time, my first thought will be, okay, I'll speak to the teacher.
Yeah,
the teacher says I'll believe that.
Also, apparently, the way it works is that the more intelligent the child is, the quicker they learn to lie. And
I can see that.
What that must mean is that, because if you think about it, right, as adults, we know that when you lie, you don't just say a lie and that's it. That creates like a ripple effect of contingent possibilities and intending occurrences, etc. But as a child, you don't see that. You just think, oh, I can just say this thing now, and it's not going to have any impact on the future, because they don't have the foresight to see into the future. So it makes complete sense. Like, I remember when I was young, I was like, why wouldn't you lie? You could just lie, and it's like, there you go, problem's gone. But it doesn't work like that, does it? It's not like
it's so true. They don't understand the fact that you watch them. Like, that's why even today with kids, I'm still just like, I'm sat next to them, right? Let's say I'm sat next to them and they literally just swear. Right, they'll just swear under their breath, not trying to show off, but they've heard it at home. They just say, oh, I don't know if we can swear in this podcast, but they're just like, oh, and and I'll go, oh, no, sorry, we don't use that language in school. And they'll go, what? Then you can't say it. That's not how we speak in school. I didn't. It's like, whoa. And the best thing, right? The most hilarious thing about being a teacher, which happens every year without fail, probably every week, is you'll hear something's happened on the playground, right? So kids will come in and they'll say, oh, little Jimmy, he was, sorry, Jimmy, by the way, if he exists, I keep using you as an example, but little Jimmy,
he's a good
he,
one, really.
On the playground, he pushed me over. And then someone else say, yeah, we saw him. So as soon as you've got 3 or 4, you're like, okay, something probably happened. So you get Jimmy over, you say, Jimmy, can I have a word, please? And he'll walk up to you, and before you say anything, Jimmy will go, I didn't push him. I was like, oh, well, I've not mentioned anything yet, actually. So what do you mean you didn't push him?
You pushed me.
Yeah, I didn't push him, he pushed me. I was like, cool, well, you pushed him then, because you've been thinking of it in your head already.
Yeah, because it's like, because when you're young, you haven't sort of placed your different parts of your personality in the right order. So not in the right order, but in like a cohesive order. So you act out, and then you're like, I don't want to act out. Okay, what do? I'm just going to die. I'm just going to say I didn't do it. And it's like jumping from those different sort of like inside out.
Well, one other thing, just jumping back on like Dylan's point, and thinking of something you said earlier about parents and how like even it's changing. We were just talking about change over time, and even how it's changing for parents. One of the biggest changes I've noticed with parents is the fact that just riding on this is the fact that they do just believe their kids, and the respect for teachers. That is one thing I'll say that I think is like visibly, obviously different now. It is the complete sort of lack of respect to even like think that the teacher might, maybe their words are worth something, and the kids are always believed, not always, but the kids will be believed straight away and
by these parents.
Yeah, and there's that, we talked about this, maybe on our podcast recently, but there's that famous meme where it's like there's 2 pictures, one above the other, and it was like, oh, in the 1960s, it's a parent and a child standing next to a teacher's desk, and the parent is sort of shouting at the child saying, why have you done this thing, whatever the naughty thing was, why have you done this? And then it goes down to today, and it's the same scenario, and it's the parent shouting at the teacher saying, why have you let my kid do this thing, or something like that. And it was, just taking the mick out of the fact that the blame seems to have shifted. Now the responsibility seems to have shifted. And I think that is something I've noticed even in my 10 years, is that difference in responsibility from the parents and who they put everything on.
Well, something that's definitely, and I've spoken to another teacher about this, is that teachers nowadays take on a far more parental role than they used to do in the 50s and in sort of historically, and it's probably got a large part to do with the fact that both parents now work, so there isn't like a primary as such caregiver. And I had a woman on my podcast who wrote a book called Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years of Life is Essential. Basically said mums or dads, but mums tend to help children integrate their sort of their like neurotic tendencies and sort of anxious and crying, and mums are really good at that. That's sort of comforting. And then dads are better at helping children integrate their sort of aggression and sort of boisterousness. So and I thought that was really interesting. And obviously that she's sort of generalizing, but anyone can do it. But that was
of course.
That is what she was kind of saying. But I think the key takeaway was that those first 3 years of life are really, really important to the development of the child. And if you can sort of spend as much time as you possibly can with them in that first 3 years, that's kind of like almost a lot of parenting is done in the early years of them. And then what tends to happen is they tend to socialize, and they're almost parented by their peers when they get a bit older. And their peers like chip them into shape, and that can be brutal and it can be really harsh. And you just hope that they find a peer group that is sort of, they're like a good average of their peer group, so that they don't feel they're too on, they don't want to be too on the outskirts, but they don't want to be like the center of attention as well, because
you can really see that at school. You can really identify the children who are proper social sponges. Like they will just latch on to a friend or a friendship group and will absolutely absorb their personalities. You can really tell. It's very interesting. And then you get the children that are almost the complete opposite. Maybe it is down to that first 3 years. Maybe they had a very different experience. I don't know. But then you get the other children that seem a bit more confident, and they're often like really, really like their parents and quite happy with who they are, and not really interested in absorbing personality of the people around them. They're just content. And it is funny just kind of watching those relationships develop. I was definitely, I don't know what you were like, but I was definitely the first one. Like I would just absorb. Like luckily I had a nice bunch of friends around me, but I absolutely would just form my opinions based on their opinions, and I just wanted to make sure I was liked. I just wanted to fit in. That was the only thing that mattered. And my friends will think this. Cool, I think that now as well. And I was absolutely that kid growing up. So it's funny to see them younger, see mini me's.
Yeah. I think, I've probably got one more question to me, but I think we're ready to stop. What do you think? Both of you can answer as the final question, but what do you think the importance of a good teacher? We've probably touched on it in various conversations, but I know one of you said earlier that the sort of influence that a teacher has on a child is, I think it was Dylan, that influence the teacher has on a child is very minimal. But I think I understand what you mean, but I also think it can be exceptionally large. I remember I know this is not the question, but there was a chat that I had when I was working, and this guy basically said, every single one of you can probably name a teacher who was very influential in your life. There isn't really any other person that people come into, other than parents, that people come into contact with that they can say that about. Teaching is kind of like the only thing where because as we said, you're working with young people at a young age. So when you get older, when you're 23 and you spend 6 months with someone, it's like, and when you're 63, it's even more. But when you're 8 and you spend 6 months with a teacher or a year with a teacher, that's like a big chunk of your life that you've just spent with that person.
Yeah, huge.
So what would you say the role of a great teacher is, and how do you think individually both of you are what do you think your sort of individual strengths play into being a good teacher?
Yeah. So I'm going to clarify something, because I think what you're saying, I completely agree with it. When I said teachers don't have as much of an impact, I really truly mean in terms of
Academic.
getting across a maths curriculum.
Okay.
Right. So in terms of, I've seen amazing teachers, and I've seen bang average teachers, and I've seen bad teachers over my time.
Mm.
And when it comes to the end of the year, when we see how children have made progress, down to a T, every child gets better at maths. Every child gets better at English. There's planning they can take from, etc. Make that progress. The better teachers make a bit more progress in terms of academic-wise, and the worst teachers maybe make a little bit less. And some years you have different cohorts. It's hard to gauge. I think you absolutely, though, can have a massive impact as a teacher on a child. And it is something that I would put down as probably my favorite, definitely my top 3 part of teaching, is the impact and the relationships you can build with children. And I always go back to certain children. I always think of certain children. The other day, it was the first day of school. I had parked around the corner to nip into the shop before school, because obviously I'm unorganized. I hadn't got my lunch ready. So I went to get my lunch. And as I was leaving my car, 3 children walked down who were on their first day in year 7. Now, I'm not even a year 6 teacher. I'm a year 4 teacher. I taught these children 3-4 years ago. But their face lit up when they saw me. Their face lit up, and they were excited, and they were showing me their uniform. They were pointing to their new badge. And that, I think, in a nutshell, just sums up what an impact you can have as an adult. Not only can you have on the children, because the children love being in your classroom. And by the way, that progress comes from my point of view, what I do, and I'll answer your second question here, is what I think personally I can give to the job, is building those relationships, forming those amazing bonds with the children. That allows the progress to happen academically. So you need to invest time in knowing the children individually, in being that safe space for them, in talking to them about what they want to talk about, in them thinking that it's okay to make mistakes wherever they are, in them feeling that they can talk to you if they had a bad day yesterday, and teacher's not going to bite their head off if they don't work as hard as they can for the morning. Understanding that these children are human beings who are actually in the rawest state possible as a human being, and you have an impact on how they develop. That's unique to teaching, and especially unique to teaching lower and younger children. And I see it as a privilege, to be honest with you, that I can be in charge of children and be the person. I know for these 32 kids, I'm these kids' safe space, and I know I can help them develop. And that's my favorite thing by far, is those relationships you build with them and seeing them develop as human beings.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant.
Should I jump in?
Hayden,
Try and follow that, Hayden.
Yeah. It was really interesting. I was listening to Dylan the whole time thinking, I don't just want to say the same thing. I very, very much agree. So I'm just going to give a really short answer. And about, your question was, what do you think the role of a good teacher is? And I think it really is simply, and I hope this kind of summarizes what Dylan was saying. I think the role of a good teacher is to teach a child to be content, to be happy, to find happiness in their life and enjoy their life. And if that comes through, they love maths, cool. If it's something else, great. But I really do just think that kind of summarizes what I think the role of a good teacher is about that holistic side of things that we started, this whole conversation about the beginning of this podcast, is finding happiness in your life. I think that's it. If you can teach a kid to be happy, then you're a winner. They'll smile at you when they see you 3 years later, because they'll think, oh, I love that teacher, because you know what? I'm a happier person now because they really showed me how to find that.
Will they remember exactly how I taught perimeter that day? Maybe not.
No.
Maybe not. In the moment, it's important and it forms them bonds, like you said. But do you know what?
Well, you can do that experiment right now. All of us can. Think. You said everyone could think of their favorite teacher. Okay, think of your favorite teacher right now. Do you remember what they taught you, like the curriculum? Honestly, not a thing.
No.
Why are they my favorite teacher then? What, clearly nothing to do with the academics. They're my favorite teacher because they made me feel good. They made me think I could do stuff well. They made me believe in myself. They helped me with my anxiety, all those sorts of things. That's what it is. That's the role of a good teacher.